Mitch,
Hey, Keith.
welcome back, man.
Hey, buddy. It's good to be here.
It's great to be here. We are.
How are things?
Everything is amazing, although I feel it's a little cold in the studio today for some reason. Did you know we didn't have power in half the building before you showed up?
I did not.
And then it just magically came on.
Half the building?
Half the building.
That's more fascinating than all the buildings.
Seriously, like half the building did not have power. Breakers were fine. Brent seems to think that maybe we lost a leg of power to the building, and so
Yeah, that happened. Had that out of the barn before.
So it just, we lost a little bit of power, but not enough.
Yep. Makes
So,
total sense.
yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me, but I could tell how some people were a little confused by it. So that got me thinking.
Okay.
That got me thinking.
Oh, like
what
the
is-
topic for the day?
Yeah, what is something so complex that even as an adult you struggle to understand it?
So since you led in with electricity, as things get more complicated, I have a hard time understanding them. Okay. So like electrical wiring, given that you have some electricity and it's an alternating current and it goes to a switch, and that's a single pole switch, and the switch breaks the current between the switch and the in source via the light bulb. Okay. Got it. Three-way switches. Okay. You're redirecting the current between two switches and the bulb. It takes me a minute, a sheet of paper, I can wrap my head around it. Okay. 4 or 5-way switches blows my mind.
Need multiple sheets of paper, still can't come to it.
Still don't. Yeah. That one's,
Interesting.
it's hard.
But you have enough rudimentary knowledge
To
of
avoid messing
electricity
with them.
and switches that you can kind of make sense on why it works in some way. You just couldn't make it work.
Yeah, and I couldn't make the electricity to like make the thing work. Like
Yeah.
I don't get that,
How they make electricity.
Yeah, that one baffles me. Some of those things like this podcast, like how this voice is going to get like recorded to get replayed.
Yeah.
Blows my mind, especially when you move it back to like the original stuff. Like now, if you're just like, oh, it's all digital, I'd be like, oh, it's all digital.
It's all digital.
Right.
That makes
like
sense.
that makes sense. But
Yeah.
like, the old like
Phonograph?
Victronox or the phonograph
Yep,
or the
yep.
right, like, or even like a vinyl.
The ridges
scratches.
and the needle. Yeah.
Oh, scratch. Oh, yeah. You just
Yeah.
made a noise and a vibration.
It vibrates.
Yeah, and
and
it's
then it, yeah.
And I could see how that works on a bigger level.
Okay.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
like I could see how you could be like, hey, we're gonna make some vibrations. It's like the seismograph thing.
Oh yeah.
I get how the vibrations cause the balanced needle to
move.
right.
Yep.
I cannot fathom how you could take that needle and the paper and work it backwards, which you can't, and cause an earthquake.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? But like that's what we're doing with sound, right?
That would be interesting. Right?
I get it to where you can be like, oh, when these sound waves create a
Yeah.
vibration to create, moves air and blah, 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 blah. And this needle's going to record what that looks like.
Yeah.
Totally get it. Now, when you play it back to me, blows my mind.
Okay.
Simpleton, Keith.
Well, I appreciate
And
that.
Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. So, which I would say there's a lot of things in this world I don't understand in Einstein quotations well enough.
Yeah, I think that's a really good quote in terms of, I think back to this. I don't remember what it was about, but I was in college. It was in a chemistry class, and the lab. So I went to a Jesuit school, and the lab we had nuns and fathers that taught some classes, and the lab was taught by a very nice lady, been a nun her entire life, right? I think she was like in her low 70s, okay? And all she did was teach this lab, right, for years and years and years. And there was some kind of concept that I was not understanding, right? Like I was not understanding how these two molecules bonded. And that's just an example. And I was like, so I asked the question, and she kind of couldn't really answer it for me, you know. And I was like, but I don't understand why it works, you know. And I asked her 2 or 3 times, and she finally got mad, slapped the ruler on the table, like classic movie
Uh-huh.
style, and goes, "Keith, take it on faith."
Ooh,
And I was like, "Yes, ma'am." You know, like, what are you gonna say to that, right?
it works.
And if you know, so I think about that, right? If you can't explain it to somebody, then you probably don't really understand it yourself. And so that's kind of, she probably didn't really quite understand it either,
And to
couldn't.
transition it onto taking things on faith, I think there's a lot of stuff. I think one of the errors we make is trying to fully understand God. I think
Mm,
that's like the biggest mistake we can, right? Like,
yeah.
we're incapable of that.
Yes.
Take it on faith.
Yeah.
You're not capable of it. You can't figure it out. Like, theology is a wacky endeavor. You know,
Yeah.
it'd be like,
You wonder
yeah,
how much stuff we might not
yeah,
understand fully. So we think we've got this theology all figured out.
we have,
but then it's like,
we have ideas.
oh shoot.
We have ideas of the way people, humans,
Yeah.
flawed, think it may work based on other humans' interpretations of how God acted in their lives directly
Yeah.
or indirectly. Awesome. It's really good. It's fascinating. I love it. I like studying it.
Yeah.
But like, you can't, this side of life, this side of death, there is no full understanding of it.
I'm really not sure.
It'd be
Even,
like,
I'm not even sure after death if you can have a full understanding of it, right? Like, I just don't. I think there's just some things that are beyond our ability to comprehend, even posthumously. Like,
yeah,
I think that.
I think there is a, if you're a person who needs to know things, which I think you are,
I am.
I
that
have
kind of
hope
person.
for you that posthumously, you will be made fully aware to your full satisfaction.
Oh yeah, no.
Now,
I think
if
that's the key, right?
Yeah.
To your satisfaction, right?
I mean, I'm fully aware to my full satisfaction right now, Keith. Right now. Check. God is big. I am small.
So, but you can see how
Very, very big and very, very small.
you're like a caterpillar.
Thanks for
Oh no, a grasshopper, right? Isn't that what the scripture? One of the scriptures that God is like a big canopy, right? And you're just like a little grasshopper hanging out in the canopy. But so we're continuing this sermon series, the reason for the season, and we're talking about just this catchphrasey bumper sticker, Jesus is the reason for the season, but it's why Jesus is the reason for the season, right? And so this week we're kind of talking about how God has used Jesus to show himself to us, right? We can see who God is through Jesus and his works and his acts and his teachings, right? And so this idea, though, that as finite humans, we can't grasp infinite concepts. And you kind of talked a little bit about how you're fine with that. You can take stuff on faith, but people like myself, it becomes difficult and can in times impact our faith journeys, right? And I really think about the times where you've got, probably the ultimate question is, if God is all good and God is all powerful, why does suffering exist, right? And so people that get impacted by suffering, whether it's themselves or a family member, this is usually one of those things that our finite knowledge and trying to understand, this infinite concept impacts us, right? What do you think? Like, I know from a knowledge perspective, you're okay with not knowing how something works, right? But has any of this ever impacted your faith journey or somebody that you've known?
Oh yeah, I think a lot of people, when horrible things happen, they kind of one of the hard parts to wrestle with is accepting that life is suffering, horrible things happen, and you know, changing your perspective to some of that suffering can help you cope with it. But we all know that horrible things happen, suffering happens, life is suffering. That's part of life. One of my very favorite songs, Jason Isbell has a song, "If We Were Vampires." You know, it's the name of the song. I know
Okay,
it sounds
all right,
I know
all
it
right.
sounds really dumb, right?
Okay.
But it's a great song, and that's just what the title is. But you know, but one of the lyrics is "Death is a gift." Because if we are vampires, right? And what do vampires do, right?
Well, generally live forever.
historically in the mythological, they can't die,
Right.
right? So nothing's important because time's not running out. So what if time running out is a gift? It gives us it gives us value
In perspective.
to the time we have. So if it all boils down to time, and when you say we're finite, that means you're talking about time. We have a finite amount of it. You know, time's running out.
Yeah.
So what do you do with it? And what assigns importance to what you do with it is the fact that you don't have an infinite amount of it.
Right.
You have a finite amount of it. So that, so having those, having shared experiences, having relationships, having, being able to be loved and to love, right? Like these godly emotions are these pinnacles of using our time in a way that matters, because if you had infinite amount of time, you just waste it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to backtrack a little bit to what you kind of said previously, which was, you know, suffering it exists in this world. It will always exist. It's just part of the human experience. But what we can see from God is that Jesus suffered in this life too. Right. And so even God humbling himself to become human still suffered for us, but still had to suffer because that's what this world is. And so if you think about in a time where you're suffering or somebody around you suffering, and I know it doesn't make it any easier, but understanding that God himself too suffered in this world with you. And I think that's
and it's made true in the parable of a seed where for something has to die for life to happen. You know, and it seems weird we talk about the seed dying, right? Well, it's not remaining a seed.
Right.
It cannot just be a seed forever. If it's just a seed forever, it doesn't fulfill its purpose or its meaning. But in transforming, in becoming, in dying as a seed, to not be a seed, it becomes what it was made to become, which is something bigger and better, and
which produces more seeds, then that plant has to die, and then those seeds have to die for, and so on, the cycle of life. Right? Yeah.
So when you think about, I think the hardest thing for us to grasp as finite individuals is an infinite perspective. We think of our hardships and our troubles and how, and you think, well, just if everything was perfect and you live forever and there was no pain or suffering or aging or right. Well, the only reason you or I exist is because circles of life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think about so obviously Christmas is coming up soon.
Did this just turn into a layman's term philosophy podcast?
I don't know what happened.
Philosophies and World Religions by layman's Keith and Mitch.
I think that taking it from the perspective of if Jesus came to show us what God is like, right? And that he had to both be born and to die, and then, on a different point, be resurrected, right? To show us the way, the path, what can happen, right? Christmas is really about the birth, right? Um, that seed becoming a plant. And so I think for me, going through some of this series is giving me a little bit different perspective on Christmas, in terms of like, it's not just Jesus's birthday, right? We're not celebrating just the birthday of Jesus, but it's really like, to me, it's kind of like a cosmic event. Like, I remember years ago when we had the solar eclipse. Do you remember that?
Oh,
Of course. I mean, how could you not?
life changing.
Yeah,
Loved every second of it.
yeah,
Started plotting family trips based on when the next one's going to
yeah,
be and where it's going to be.
yeah.
Got Spain coming up in 2028.
Oh, well, Spain's
Sounds like
nice.
fun. Australia's got
Yeah,
one
I have a friend that lives
between
in
now
Spain.
and then.
But it was great.
Went down to see one in
kids
Arkansas.
kids got out of school, right? We bought all the fancy glasses, and they. And I'm not talking about the partial. That was a few years ago. I'm talking about the full, right? It was like, I don't know, 3 minutes.
Oh, you're not talking about the partial a year ago that was in Arkansas, because I went to there
Oh, well,
to
let's
see it full blown. Totality, baby.
And
Love it.
I think that like, think about in our history as a species, right? As a all the civilizations of existing, how many times we saw cosmic events, and we mark them as a civilization, right? Like, whether it's solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, the northern lights, meteor showers. Obviously, the dinosaurs remember one specific meteor shower.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Did you call that a shower?
well, I'm sure some of it broke off, right? It wasn't just one giant asteroid that destroyed all of them. And I think about Christmas, and my perspective is really changing from just because you and I have a birthday.
I do have a
I
birthday.
do, and it's not some cosmic event, right? Like, it's just like, you wake up, people are like, hey, happy birthday, here's a present, thanks. Maybe you go out to eat. Maybe you cook. I cook for myself for my birthday because I love it. But it's not a grand event, right? And so I think almost sometimes we view Christmas as a birthday, and not this grand cosmic event of God humbling himself for us, to show us what he's like, right? And so for me, I get a new perspective on when people are like, because I need to see it, I need to understand it. And so when people are like, oh, you show me God, I'll believe. God
Yeah.
needs to show me himself, and I'll believe. Well, he did, right?
And it takes a minute.
And it takes him, and so for me, my brain is kind of rewiring a little bit around
Expectation.
it. What do you think? You as well?
Yeah, I can agree with that. Get on board with that. Like we all love a good story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's because God loves a good story, and part of the fingerprint of God on us, created in God's image, is part of our desire for understanding and seeing, the cosmic story,
And how we fit into it.
And we have that, C.S. Lewis says the most plausible explanation, if you find yourself longing for desires that are never met by, I'm butchering this quote, but never met by this world, well, the most probable explanation is you were made for a different world.
Yeah.
Right. Which is mind-boggling on the onset, but ponder it a little bit, and we can reach temporary happiness, but why are we always searching after an everlasting joy if we know it's not obtainable? Why are we searching after it? Well, why are we wired to search after it? Lewis would say we're wired to search after it because it is possible to obtain it, just not on this side of death.
Side of the word. Yeah.
So, yada, yada, yada. I think the story of salvation has to have a story. It's not going to be a thunderclap, and right?
Yeah.
Because we desire the story. So the origin story is there's a birth, and it's amazing, and it's proclaimed, and it's pronounced, and it's humble, but it's made known. It's made known in a way that it could be retorted and retold, and we love being able to understand a story and it being told to us in a way that we're a part of it, and then we're able to retell it. And the retelling it makes us a part of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the magic of Christmas and the Christmas season. And I think of all the wonderful ways we have to use analogies to tell the story now. And then I also look back at how cool a simpler time was when they just had, lamplight and we're telling the story.
Yeah. 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 I think that obviously the story has changed a little bit with Hollywood and movies and in pop culture and paintings and poems and everything that's been kind of added into it. We were, and I'm not even going to attempt to
Butcher a quote like I did.
Butcher a hymn. Maybe it was a song. But this Sunday at service, there was, I started like.
What's the difference between a hymn and a song?
Well, I just mean like, I don't know if it was a hymn that we sang in the traditional service or if it was one of the modern songs. That's what I was trying to imply. But like, I was listening to some of the language and I was like, that doesn't sound right. Like that doesn't make any sense. Right. And I've thought about this for a while. Not that this is super Christmassy, but I've thought about Corey Asbury's "Reckless Love," right?
Yeah.
This idea that God recklessly chases after you, right?
I think we've talked about this before too. Yeah.
Have we on air?
No, I don't know that we've talked about it on air. This is a
maybe
side
this is
combo.
just a side conversation. It's hard once you pass 100 episodes. It's hard to
tell what's on air, what's off air, what's.
But like, can God be reckless? Right, like. Like that.
And
that concept is foreign.
We argued about this because you're like no, God can only be deliberate.
Right.
Well, that was your side of the argument, right?
It's basically like God is deliberate in his actions. He understands the outcome before. You know what I mean? Like he
foreknowing.
Sees and he's all knowing.
Foreknowledge.
So like it's not reckless. Like he already knows the outcome before he does something, right? And so like it makes no sense to me that God could be reckless.
So, and my argument was, or is, so if you foreknew that, let's use stocks, for example. If you had the foreknowledge that something was just gonna, tank.
Explode.
Just, pick a direction.
Okay,
right?
yeah, up or down.
Yeah,
lots.
It's just gonna,
It's just gonna rocket to the moon.
Right? But you recklessly just decided to not make the most prudent decision. Right?
No, the most prudent decision would be to sell everything that you own and buy that stock.
Right.
And then sell it.
Right. Or whatever.
Once it's at its peak, if you know what that peak is.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
That would be the most prudent decision.
Right. But reckless would be anything other than that.
Okay.
Regardless of the reasons. Well, that's where you get into the reckless love. it's not that it's irresponsible. It's just not, the love outweighs any short-term prudency that might be involved, because there isn't
this might be something so complex that I struggle to understand.
The worldly payout doesn't matter.
Yeah, I just I don't think reckless is one of the virtues that is listed in the Bible. You know, humility, patience, recklessness. No, I don't think that's...
I think that's why it's a poignant lyric for a song to use with... to ascribe
Jesus ever reckless?
To ascribe to God's love.
Was Jesus ever? If Jesus is a reflection of God,
Jesus is reckless,
reckless
love. Yeah, going to the cross for you.
That is reckless.
See, that's what I see.
I think you won me over.
See, I just explained.
I think you won me over.
If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. How do you understand it now?
Look at that. I think it's.
I think the most reckless thing Jesus ever did was go to the cross for me. I think that sounds like a Paul quote.
Yeah.
The most wretched.
I don't think Paul said that, but it sounds like it could have come from Paul.
Okay.
Maybe in his 5th Corinthians letter.
It's out there.
That's out there somewhere. Yeah, that makes sense to me. And you know what I struggle with, and maybe you do too at times, and we can let the audience know that they're in good company, but trying to understand Jesus' divine nature and like why he did certain things, and he's got all this power to heal people and stuff, and it's just like, why don't you just why don't you just show us God? Just show us God's face, right? Just show us ultimate proof, right? And he's like, duh, I'm it. Like you're standing in front of it. I am in the Father is in me, right? So even Jesus' own disciples struggled to understand who Jesus really was. And I think, you tell me if I'm wrong, that they're in good company, because sometimes I struggle to understand it.
Yeah, we're having a great confirmation class, and we're talking about the Trinity, right? And Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and 3 in 1, and like this isn't math.
Yeah.
No math class I ever took, right? But it's our human attempt at reconciling the aspects of an omnipresent, omnipotent God who's triune in nature. What? But it's
how many blank stares do you get from some kids when you're trying to explain that?
I don't know. Everyone that's in there, including if there was a mirror, mine, right?
Yeah.
But the beautiful thing is understanding that it is our febile, limited human attempt at understanding God, right? Like that's the building block I think you got to stand with, right? Start with. This isn't, it's not right there in the, you're not like page 4 of your Bible. You get a diagram to explain how God works. But I will say there's some awesome YouTube videos that I found very helpful.
Yeah.
And one of which is like if you're on a 2-dimensional plane, and there's a 3-dimensional object.
Correct.
It's a cross section of a 3-dimensional object. If you're on the plane, you just see a shape.
Correct.
Where there's actually a 3-dimensional object.
Correct.
Moving.
Correct.
Right. So you're only ever able to see parts of the shape as it presents itself, as it's in relation to the plane you're on.
Right.
Trinity. You never have the full perspective to perceive.
For sure.
Perceive the 3 parts working together as a whole.
And this is why, by the way, just as a weird aside, this is why people have a hard time understanding 4th dimension.
Oh,
right.
You've tried to explain this to me before.
Because it's the same thing. Because we can only see in the 3rd dimension. And so trying to understand something that's so complex you struggle to understand, is some kind of fourth dimension that we can't perceive.
Exactly.
Right.
We're limited by our own perception. This did turn into a philosophy class.
It did. It was great. It's great though.
I love it.
So
I'm having fun. I hope you're having fun. I hope everybody
blast.
out there in
I
podcast,
hope
YouTube land is having a good
listen
time.
to this full episode because it's actually pretty good. Yeah. So just wrapping up because we're running out of the sands of time.
Yeah, they are.
And they're running out rapidly.
Which I don't understand time, but
we can't get into that right now. I would just say, so you know, we've got a couple more of these episodes in this series that we're doing around Christmas and the reason for the season. But I would just leave everybody with this probably key takeaway. And if you got a different one, that's great. But Jesus came to reveal God's nature and character and proximity to us. Period. Right? Like God sent himself, his son, down to us to reveal to us who God is and that God is close to us now, even now. And I think that that concept is really hard for people to understand when they're struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're struggling and you're in that spot where it's hard to understand that, just reflect on what we've talked about today and that God has not abandoned us. He sent himself down to show us who he is and to have some take it on some faith.
Mm-hmm.
Right? As my teacher said, right? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree that it's God was revealed to us through Christ, and that's and nobody I know was personally there to witness it.
Nope.
So having faith and understanding our part of the story and being able to actively participate in the story and then be able to retell it with how we fit into it is a powerful part of the human experience, which I believe fully that we're made in the image of God, and that's part of our draw to know the story, tell the story, and be a part of the story.
That's it.
So, greatest story ever told, and you're part of it, Keith.
Hey, you are too. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.